Welcome to Live Unashamed, where we pause the show and invite members of our team to talk vulnerably about their own recovery, things they're learning, the resources that are actually working, and what it truly means to live unashamed.
Hi, James.
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And that is just a sunshiny, happy face.
Wow.
So good to see you today.
Such a beautiful face.
It is.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Did
that.
you notice he didn't even say hi to me? He's like, who's that dude over there?
Well, normally, Never, I'm not going to defend myself.
I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm just gonna set that down right now.
I still love you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. How are you, man?
Freaking awesome.
You know what? And he's having a good hair day. This is what I noticed.
Right?
Thank you.
And I feel like I'm not. So like it just stands
That's
out.
fine.
a
I
lot
actually
more.
thought you were having a pretty good hair day.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I cut hair, so I would know that.
Okay. I didn't know you were
I do cut hair.
a stylist. Wow.
A barber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sick.
Unofficially.
Sweet. Well, I need a haircut.
Chris, you're wearing your oh, I can do that. I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Set me up sometime.
All right.
Chris, I noticed you're wearing your I Love Jesus socks again.
Always.
It's a staple
When
for
we're
these
recording,
recordings.
got the I Love Jesus socks.
Yep.
Brings the Jesus power. So, guys, trauma and therapy. You guys know a little bit about that.
Wait, there's trauma in therapy?
I mean, some people have been traumatized in their therapy.
True story, bro.
We have people come to us to try to fix that.
Trauma
Yeah.
and addiction therapy. What are you guys' thoughts on trauma and addiction therapy? How do trauma and addiction tie together?
So that's a whole nother question. So it's like, are we talking about like how do we deal with trauma in therapy, or are we talking about how do addiction and trauma, how are they connected?
Well, I think we should all just talk about how have we dealt with trauma in our own addiction recovery. That's the most unashamed way to go about this. I just
Yeah.
I feel constantly like there's just more that I uncover.
Okay.
There's more wounds. There's more things that keep me stuck in addiction. So
Okay. So, Sam, as you have done, then you're working through addiction, and then also done some of your own trauma work. In your experience, what has doing trauma work done or impacted your recovery, your healing?
yeah,
Your identity.
identity is a big one because most of the trauma was rooted in identities. Um,
And then how did that identity then connect to your addiction
Yeah.
behavior,
Yeah.
your compulsive behavior?
yeah,
I'm not a big fan of the word addiction when it comes to
Sure,
this stuff, but
sure.
I get,
whatever
people can
habitual
connect to.
behavior that I'm
Sure,
experiencing.
Sure.
And there's a place for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Not everybody has an addiction. My experience has been that, like a couple years ago, I talked about this a little bit in my story. I went to a therapist who finally, I just said like, hey, I've been going to therapy for years and I can't figure this out and I'm still using compulsively. And it feels like every single day I cannot control the lust. And she said, I have guys coming to me all the time and they tell me the same story that you just told me, and it sets off an alarm bell in my head. There's probably some trauma involved, right? There's probably an identity that you took on as a result of experiences when you were younger or recently. That's pushing you towards addiction as a way to cope, and that was so helpful for the past 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. That's been my emphasis. Is like she said that and it clicked, and I knew Jesus was telling me like, hey, this is the real problem. Like, you're not bad. You're not. It's not because you're not strong enough. It's because there's just some things that you believe about yourself. And for me, the things that I believed about myself that were pushing, that have been and still today, right? I believe in healed, right? But I'm still working through some of these things. I thought I was a bad kid, and I thought I was inferior to other people.
And that belief pushed you into compulsive behavior?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because when I look at porn, your brain's really good at tricking you into thinking like, that woman on the screen doesn't think you're bad. She loves you. right? It takes away just for a moment that identity and invalidates it, and it's just the sexual need. We don't have sexual needs, right? But like the emotional need kind of gets validated through that sexual experience. And as interesting thing has happened as I've been working through a lot of that stuff, I actually just had a breakthrough in the last couple of months where I'm like, I feel like I had a choice. Like on Sunday, I'm about to. I was hanging out with some of my cousins, and everybody kind of started taking naps or whatever, and we weren't doing anything fun, and I got kind of bored and lonely. I started thinking about my life, and I had this thought, like the trigger. I want to go watch porn. I feel bored. Boredom was the trigger, and I'm feeling like unseen because of something that had happened earlier. And for the first time, one of the first times in my life, I was able to catch it and be like, this is what the need that's not being filled right now.
Yeah.
And I have a choice whether I'm going to go figure out a way to fill that need or go watch porn. And I actually didn't watch porn. And I went,
Ooh.
I left and I went and watched the Super Bowl with someone, right? Who I'm close to, but it was a matter, and I never was able to do that before I started working through some of these traumatic experiences. It's funny how those things are tied together, but they are. So what's it been like for you, James? Tell me about trauma.
Do trauma work?
Yeah, trauma work and recovery.
The trauma work, it's similar to what you're talking about. Help me recognize that. So what happened with the trauma was there are some certain beliefs that happened around the trauma, some core beliefs that got built in there, and those core beliefs were painful to believe and feel, and such as don't speak up, meaning don't have needs, meaning now I am incapable of accessing the fact that I have needs or am worthy of having them met. And the trauma work was helping me move from the trauma message of developing that trauma identity or that shame identity. But doing the trauma work helped me replace that with I am worthy to have my needs met. And it's okay for me to have needs, period. It's okay for me to ask for them to be met. And it's okay for somebody like my spouse to say, no, I'm not able to meet that right now. And, I am still worthy to have it met and can look at other ways of having that connection meet, for example, of your example, like, oh, maybe I need some connection, or I can still work through this boredom sense and deal with that emotional pain through another healthy way, rather than me choosing to compulsively game or compulsively scroll the news or Instagram or look at pornography in order to cope with the pain of boredom. In a way as to not simply numb out the fact that I'm bored or distract myself from my boredom, but in my boredom to get a connection of what would actually feel really restorative to me and actually fill a need, an emotional need. Because, I learned this early on in recovery, pretty much addiction is emotional mismanagement. Right? But doing trauma work gave me capacity to recognize that I was worthy to have needs and have them get met. Whereas my trauma identity was you aren't worthy to have needs and have a voice, let alone ask for them and have them met in a very kind way, in the way that you need them to be. So that to me has been a lot of that trauma work, is recognizing that there were things that happened to me that caused me to shut all of that down.
Well, so what do you say, James, if you have somebody that's like, well, I don't have trauma. I don't have any big traumatic events. Because we have it in our industry. So I totally get it. But
well, a lot of people,
there's
so
listeners
here's the thing.
that.
here's the thing. A lot of people actually don't recognize their trauma as trauma because they experienced it often throughout youth. And so they just thought that that's the way that life is.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, everybody has this.
Yeah,
everybody,
I resonate with
everybody
that.
doesn't have
Right.
food to eat.
Yeah, everybody, yeah,
Fish doesn't know it's in water.
correct. A fish doesn't
Everybody
know
brushes
it's-
their teeth with baking soda.
Sure. Yeah.
That was me.
Okay, so that's you, right? So for me, it was like, oh, everybody's dad is super absent and disconnected. This is how dads are.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's dad doesn't say I love you or give you hugs. That's just how dads are.
Yeah.
So for me to even recognize those as something that would create a trauma identity in me of like, oh, because I'm not the mess up in there is like I'm not worthy and I don't deserve to be told I'm loved you and held by a dad and to have a dad that's attentive. I'm not worthy of having that. And so and part of me is like, I didn't even know I needed that because it had been so shut down. So because that's the way I grew up, I'm like, how could I need that if I didn't know I needed it?
So this is what I'm hearing. Maybe it's just because been what my experience has been. What I'm hearing you say is like there's something about working through some of these past experiences, traumatic past experiences, that gets you to the point where you can honor and respect your own emotions, and then you can deal with recovery from that point. But before then, it just gets so shut down and so spiraling so quickly that there's almost there's just a gap that seems unachievable. It seems like you just can't get there.
Yeah.
That's what my experience has been anyways.
Right, because you're caught in if you don't know you need something, you're never going to get that need met in a healthy way, and you're coping with it through addiction.
Mm.
And so to me,
I'm a perfect
really,
example of that.
yeah, and so to me, really, like trauma can blind us from the fact that we have needs or what those needs might be, and that we're worthy of having needs met.
Mm.
So, as I looked at it's not about like me blaming my dad or getting angry about my dad. Like, it's just recognizing that as a child, me not having that experience caused me to create certain beliefs about myself and what I was worthy of as a human being that were harmful to me.
Yeah.
Are there other people that might have experienced a father like that wouldn't have been the same result? For sure. Everybody's different. And so to me, that was in a way what we'll call they call that like a complex trauma, because it's these subtle and simple little so-called little things that we think like, well, that's not a big deal. Why would that be so-called traumatizing? Sometimes, it's just what did the impact have, and what beliefs about yourself or whatever did you develop because of that?
Yeah.
And again, so for me, a lot of the trauma work is actually to help me just really truly recognize what I actually really need when my addiction's coming, when my compulsive behavior's coming up. To your point, when you were like, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to look at porn to deal with whatever I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Then you got clear of like, oh, what am I emotionally experiencing? Oh, I'm experiencing boredom and a sense of disconnection.
Yeah.
Now, okay, now I can back that now into how can I get those two needs met in a way that feels more in alignment and congruent with who I want to be?
Yeah.
And really, that's how I see trauma work. Is it just gives us an awareness around actually how to meet needs.
Chris, have you experienced that process?
Well, I'm kind of an anomaly where, as I've been told, like I didn't really realize that I had to process trauma or that I needed to do that until like long after I had years of sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
I never dealt with any of the trauma in my life until I had a long time of sobriety. So can you find sobriety without dealing with the trauma work? Sure. It's just really freaking hard, and it takes a lot longer, or can. But so for me, I just stepped into a different identity, and that's what helped me get through it without doing my trauma work. And then, I mean, I didn't even start doing trauma work until 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Really, when I started doing trauma work, and that was it.
Wow.
And then I'm like, holy crap, this is like, there's like so much here. And it's been beautiful and healing and amazing. And I still feel like I'm always changing and stepping into a new identity, even without having my trauma being part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
But your trauma is still affecting your life in other ways,
Oh, totally.
right? It just doesn't happen to show up in porn and affairs. It's still showing up
Yes.
for sure today.
Totally.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like it's kind of just like whack-a-mole, right? If you don't solve the underlying issues
Yeah.
there, you can hit the big one, right? That big mole. Porn's gone, right?
Yeah.
Some men can do that, and my dad being one, I have an uncle
Yeah.
who did that. But it pops up in other really unpleasant ways,
Sure.
and you never get what you want fully until
Yeah,
until you get
for me,
there.
I just had a replacement addiction of playing games on my phone.
Yeah, you've talked about that before.
Yeah, so that was one way to get rid of the porn, was to spend a whole bunch of time playing games on my phone and numbing out my feelings.
Hmm.
And again, it's learning to feel is sometimes the hardest part of all of this journey, is learning to feel and feeling safe enough in my own body to feel whatever I'm feeling, knowing that I can take care of me when I'm feeling that pain, rather than having to go somewhere like porn or a game to solve my emotional discomfort.
Guys, we want to hear from you. What are the traumas that have kept you in addiction? What are you learning about trauma from this conversation? Email us, Sam, Chris, and James at unashamedunafraid.com. Give us a 5-star review. Find us on social media at unashamedunafraid. And if you feel so inclined, you're welcome to hop on our website. We love donors and finding more people to help us further the cause through monthly donations. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. And until next time, we invite you to live unashamed.